Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's live Q&A. I'm here with Anita from Rhubarb Paper. Hello, Anita.
Hey.
And Anita's going to be talking to us today about kind of just behind the scenes, answering some questions about what it's like to actually have a greeting card company. So we've talked a lot about, different stationery, different lettering, different calligraphy for stationery, but never specifically about greeting cards and how to have a business around that specifically. So it's going to be a good conversation. As we are getting going here, tell us where you're from, say hello in the comments so we can say hi back. And feel free to throw comments and questions and stuff in here as Anita and I go. Sometimes we do more lesson style on here, but today it'll be just kind of more of a conversation and asking questions and stuff back and forth. So as we go, you're welcome to submit questions and we can pop them up on the screen, stuff like that. But before we get started, I think the most important thing to cover is, Anita, can you tell us who you are, what you do, where you're from, that kind of stuff?
Sure. So my name's Anita Bezanson, and I live on the East Coast in Canada, and I own and operate Rhubarb Paper Company, which is basically a stationery and gift line.
And how long have you been doing that?
I think I started Rhubarb. It'll be 5 years this fall.
Nice.
So
nice.
yeah, the big 5 years.
And so, we'll get into this when we start, going over some of the questions that people submitted ahead of time. But was it always this company that we see now? Like, is that how it started, or did it kind of snowball from anything else at the beginning?
Well, I'm a self-taught graphic designer and was doing freelance for a number of years. And the 3 years prior to starting Rhubarb, I was really focusing on freelance. So I was designing book covers and band posters and invitations, lots of different things, and realized that I really don't like doing freelance work. I don't like doing commission work. It's really stressful to have a client come back and say they don't like something, or to have put so much energy and effort into something and then it not be what they wanted. So I kind of knew that I needed to make a change. And I've always loved stationery since I was little. Stickers, smelly stickers. I had a collection of stickers. I had pencils, greeting cards, saved all my Valentines. So it seemed like, and I've always loved greeting cards. So it seemed like one of the things that I would most like to do moving forward with graphic design was to design greeting cards. So that was the first step.
And so you were doing client work at the same time too, as you started this, and then you at one point just kind of said, screw it, I'm going all in, or did you just quit one and start the other?
I designed a few cards first. I remember I still have a photo somewhere of like the first 3 cards that I designed and had printed just as samples to see, are they going to look okay? Is this what I want to be doing? And I think I was still kind of working on some client projects at the time that I started doing that. But I think not the thrill that I got of designing them, but kind of seeing the finished product and loving stationery so much, I knew that that was the step I wanted to take. So not long after that, I basically just stopped taking any sort of commission work at all.
Nice. And so apart from your freelance work, did you ever have any education in business or anything like that? Or you're all self-taught with how to start and run a business like this?
I took a semester of business in college and realized that that was, at the time, not what I thought I wanted to do. But also business courses in college are just not, I think things have changed so much and they're just not keeping up to date. And I didn't think at all that that was what I was going to be doing. So it's kind of surprising that I have my own business in a way. But I would say, yeah, I really didn't have any sort of experience because what you actually bring to the table and what you learn as a business person is so much different than what they teach you in like community college or even like any sort of university like course.
Yeah. Well, and I think that it's encouraging to hear that for people that, rather than having the business and finding the passion, you had the passion and made the business, it's all figure outable, as in the words of Marie Forleo, if you follow her.
I think it should be the opposite. I think you should have the passion first.
Yeah.
Because business stuff you can learn so easily. You just kind of learn as you go, and that passion isn't always going to be there. And I don't think your business will be successful if you don't have that passion.
Yeah, exactly. So we had some questions submitted beforehand, and actually some really good questions. There was one person in particular, Ashley, if you're listening, thank you for submitting so many great questions. It's kind of going to lead our
Yeah, I
conversation
read them.
here.
Yeah, for sure.
So I am just going to pop some of them up on the screen and we can just kind of get into them and go from there. And again,
Yeah, sure.
anybody watching, if you have questions as we go, just put them in the comments and I'll be able to see them here. So the first question was, and I think this is a good place to start, is how and where were you selling your cards before you set up your website? Like what was the very first place you started actually making money with them?
Besides family and friends who were just being very nice, Etsy. I think it's still the kind of go-to place, although I've been on Etsy for a very long time. I think since about 2006, 7. I think Etsy started in 2007. So I think I was there from the beginning as a buyer and like just selling probably vintage stuff or something like that. And I still think to get an idea of if your product is going to be sellable, Etsy is a really great place to start. And then I've only done a couple of markets, actually. I find them very stressful. I'm pretty introverted in general. I love people, but I don't necessarily love interacting with a lot of people at once. So I've done a couple of markets, but felt like it just really wasn't for me. So yeah, Etsy, I think, was the very first place where I felt like, hey, this could be something larger.
And are you still on Etsy?
I'm still on Etsy. Yeah.
So do you feel like Etsy is a great place for people still to start? Like I hear so many conflicting things, and I've had actually an Etsy expert on here talking about this, about, some people think that Etsy is too cheap and you're not valuing your work and stuff like that. But I think it's an interesting topic, especially as it relates to greeting cards, because it's also a good way to learn, like you said, if your product's going to sell, or also to go on and kind of see how you should be pricing your work. So it's interesting, but do you still think that it's the right place for people to start, like or a good kind of kicking off point?
I do. And partly that's because there really isn't anywhere else that has the sort of notoriety that Etsy has. There are websites that have popped up that kind of try to emulate Etsy, but I still think that Etsy has the most customers. There are some cheaper things on Etsy, and you do have to be careful of like copycats or things like that. But I can't think of any other place where if you want to get your product to a large number of people that are going to be specifically looking for your type of product, then yeah, I definitely think Etsy is still a good place to start.
And like, I sort of wonder too, if it's really helpful to have that online presence before you try and get it into retailers and like actual stores. So yeah, I think Etsy's a good spot. And actually, for anybody listening who hasn't watched, if you go back to thehappyevercrafter.tv, which is where all these live videos go afterwards, there was an interview with Jamie. I can't remember her last name, but we did a whole interview about Etsy and kind of dispelling all of those myths that you shouldn't be on Etsy and why it could be helpful and who it's helpful for. So that's a good one if anybody's wanting to check out more about Etsy. Okay, so you started on Etsy, and then actually the next question kind of carries right along. How did you first get retailers to carry your products when you started out? So how did you get them into actual physical stores and stuff? Actually, tell us how many stores you're in and that kind of thing right now.
I think I'm in like 280 plus, something like that. Getting close to 300 now.
And it's all around the world, right? It's not just North America.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's Australia and England and a few other countries. Yeah.
Nice. Actually, I think I first saw one of your cards when I was at a conference in Idaho. I think I told you that when I first reached out to you that I bought my friend a card there, and then I realized that you were from Canada, and I was like, oh, we need to be in touch.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I never get old of those stories of like, hey, I saw your card here, or like I saw it on this Instagram in this like, far off place or whatever. I think it's still really, really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a hard question for me because I did reach out to a couple of like dream stores at the beginning before I knew anything about anything. And I was
when you say reach out, you mean like you just emailed them or something?
Yeah. And I still hated doing that. It's just not my personality at all. And I was really lucky that I think I had Instagram at a time when it was still really beneficial to businesses. Not that it's not now, but I feel like it's just so much harder to get a footing. on Instagram now, that there were a lot of stores that reached out to me. I've honestly, I think, only reached out to about 5 stores. And that was probably in the first 6 months of starting Rhubarb. Since then, I have not reached out to a single store. They all generally contact me, which is great. I'm sure there will come a point where I'll have to cold email again. But my suggestion would be, if reaching out, it would definitely be an email, and pick the stores that you would really love to be in and that you think would be a good fit, because not every store would be a good fit for your product. So I think that's part of the effort has to be doing your research and finding stores that would most likely carry your product. Otherwise, if you're reaching out to a store that it's not their style, you're probably going to get a rejection. So I think that's important to keep in mind too when reaching out to stores.
So when you reach out, what kind of information would you give them? Like, do you send them some pictures of your cards, or do you ever send actual samples and stuff like that? How does all of that work? Like, what would you actually say in that email to help people out?
I think in the emails, I didn't send samples. I think at the time I didn't really know that was even a thing. So I think I attached some photos and a line sheet where they could just send me the SKUs and place an order. But as far as what I said, I mean, it's really important to be yourself, but also kind of let them know why that their store is so appealing to you, what it is that you like so much about that store. Do your research on the store, and maybe mention a few things within the email. Like, you're basically selling yourself and your products in one email. And I think it is really important to sell yourself, not to be fake, to be who you are, but I find like my favorite retailers and the ones that order the most from me, there's some sort of connection. We have like a personal relationship. So when we're emailing each other back and forth about reorders or just any emails at all, there is like, how are you? Like, how was that, event that you went to? Or how are you feeling if they weren't feeling well, or that sort of thing. So I think that's really important. Kind of get to know the retailers behind the stores that you're pitching to, and be personalized in your emails, not just like a mass email, the same email that you send to everybody. So I think that's really important.
And I mean, I think that applies to every aspect of business, not just trying to get somebody to buy your stuff, but just if you're trying to make any kind of connection, you don't want to just email somebody and be like, hi, can you do this for me?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if we back up a little bit, what I imagine is, say I wanted to, I made a line of greeting cards. That's as far as I've gotten. I've never sold it. I've never done anything, but I know I want to get it into this one store. I think where people get hung up and get overwhelmed is understanding how that even works. Like, how does it work if my card is in that store? How do I get paid? Do they buy it from me right away and then they make their money? Like, I think it's just for somebody who has zero retail background, and zero understanding of that. How does it work? So can you just give us like layman's terms of how it actually works and what the options are when you have your cards in a store?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is to know how much it costs you to make a card. Then you would double that price for wholesale. And how much it costs to make a card, including how much you want to pay yourself, basically. Then you double that cost for wholesale, and then you double it again for retail. So for me, my cards are $2.50 wholesale, and a retailer would sell them for $5. That would be the suggested retail price. They might raise the price a little more because they have to pay shipping and things like that. So that's important to know. And then there are 2 types of stores. You could have a store that operates on consignment, which I have a couple of stores when I started out, but I still operate on consignment because they've been so good to me and they're great to work with. I don't love consignment. I feel if your product is good enough, then a store should be willing to pay outright for it.
So what does consignment mean?
Basically, you give them the product up front and they pay you when it sells. So there's also risk involved. If a store closes down, they could keep your stock and it could be gosh knows where, so there are a lot of things to consider if you're going to do consignment with a store. But they do pay you the wholesale price when the item sells. So usually every month they'll send you your sales. You'd create an invoice for them and send it to them and they would pay you. That's how it works for me anyway. So
a store, or you approach a store, they approach you and say, I want your cards consignment in my store. Yes. They would say, okay, I'll take 10 of them.
Right.
as an example. I'll take 10 of them.
Yeah.
They don't pay you anything up front. You just give them the product. And then
Right.
when it sells at the end of the month or however you work out your deal, you send them an invoice and they pay you for however many sold.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's I have a couple of places, like I said, that are really great to deal with, and they're never late paying and everything runs really smoothly. But I think for most people, it wouldn't be the preferred. It's not guaranteed income. And so what you want is to know, hey, like these cards sold, they're not going to be sent back to me, or, and if they don't sell in that store, then the store is eating the cost, right? So they're gone out of my hands.
Does that sometimes do your agreements sometimes start on consignment and then change over after once they know if they're going to sell? Like, is that something that people want to do sometimes?
Sometimes they can. I haven't had that happen. I'm not saying because mostly the stores that I've worked with on consignment, that's just how they operate. Like,
okay.
Almost all the products there are consignment. So I haven't really moved from consignment to like them just purchasing outright from me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would say if you have a preference, it is obviously for stores to just, purchase your product and sell them and not have to deal with the headache of consignment. It can be a headache.
So the opposite of consignment would be just considered like wholesaling is the term for it? Okay.
Yeah.
And so wholesaling would be they buy it from you upfront at your 50% cost. So you said if your card is $250, they would pay 50% of that and buy them in whatever quantity they want.
Well, there's terms. So it depends on the industry, but in greeting cards, usually they'd buy them by sixes.
Okay.
So each card design, they would have to buy 6 of. So you have terms either on your website, you could have terms on your line sheet, you can email terms, or just even have a website, just a simple page set up that just lists your terms. So they kind of know that they have a minimum purchase amount, a minimum reorder amount as far as dollar amount, and then they have to purchase by the quantity. So for cards, it's 6, and for my other products, it's 4. So they'd have to purchase at least 4 pencil sets, at least 4 enamel pins of the same design. So a second design, they'd have to purchase 4 of that design as well. It just keeps things simple, and I think it also encourages buyers to purchase more. You can have a lower minimum opening order, which I kind of do because there are so many micro boutiques now that don't have a lot of space on the floor. So they just can't purchase so many of one item. But a lot of people have $100 minimum order. Some people have like $400 minimum order. And then you'd have a reorder amount of, it could be like a lesser number. So $75. If your initial order amount is, $200 or $300, then you'd probably have like $150 reorder amount. So there's lots of little things like that come along with wholesaling that can also be not a headache, but I guess once you're operating your business for a little while, it just becomes like second nature. And
so are these all things that you kind of just learned as you went? Like, did you make mistakes with these things at the beginning, or did you have a resource that kind of taught you the basics of what you needed to know?
Google. That was my resource. Google. After a while, you become friends with like fellow stationary people, and you kind of get to know the good eggs from the bad eggs, because there's people like that everywhere. And you get to know the people that you can ask, hey, like how should this work? Or, how should I be doing this? But other than that, it's just Google. I did a lot of research. Yeah.
Okay. So if we were to recap those steps for somebody who has just made a card, wants to get it into a store, it would be, first of all, determine your cost, like figure out what it costs you to make it, how much you want to make. And then what was the calculation you said? Double that for wholesale?
Yes.
And triple it for retail?
Yes.
So say your card is $1.
Right.
Which is not enough, let's be honest.
Right.
Please charge more than that.
Please charge more.
Say your card is $1. If you're going to get it into a store for wholesale, they would pay $2 for it.
Right. Yes.
And when they put it in the store, they'll charge $3 for it. Basically.
Well, if they'd charge $4 for it in the store. Yeah. So they would want to double what they paid for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Okay. Math, not my strong suit. Yeah. Okay. So that's the basic. So I think it's just, like, the wholesale calculation is what throws people off. Like, how much should the store actually be paying for it?
And you have to
Um,
also look at the market standard. I mean, no one's paying less generally than $5 for a greeting card. So you have to kind of look at those things as well. Like, so right now, a lot of stationery friends are raising their prices because the cost of paper has gone up. Shipping costs have gone up as well. So it seems to be across the industry, everyone's raising their prices right now. I've yet to do that, but it's on my list of things to do because you just want to keep up with the standards. So it's the same when you're looking to price any product, you kind of have to see like you obviously want to make enough to recoup your time and supplies, but you also have to go by what the standard in the industry is too.
right.
Yeah.
And I guess, I mean, Etsy is a good place to see those standards too, but also just even
Sure.
looking in small boutique shops, the kind of shops that you want to be in, and just
Yeah,
looking at
exactly.
what similar things are going for.
Right. Or your favorite greeting card designer's website, check that out and see what they're charging retail for a card. And you'd automatically know that store is paying half of that. Right. So then you kind of can get an idea of what the standard is as well for the wholesale cost. So
Yeah, gotcha. Um, okay, I'm gonna go back into our questions here. So, where did I go? How did you build your followers and your customer base when you first started out? So I know you said you were on Etsy, but you have quite a few followers on Instagram too. So has that just been steadily growing over however many years, or did you have kind of tactics and stuff to grow that at the beginning?
I think at first I just posted whatever. And I kind of grew a following, I think, of local folks, people that I didn't know, but that had heard maybe of my cards or just back in the day when you would see local people's Instagrams, right, popping up, then you would just follow them for fun or whatever. So I think it initially grew like that. And then I went through this period of really trying to build my followers to the point where it was giving me anxiety because I was stressing so much about like trying to have the perfect looking Instagram and the right hashtags and all of that sort of stuff. So I think I built quite a few followers then, but I seem to go through these waves of really putting a lot of effort into social media and then realizing how unhappy that's making me and backing away a bit as well. Right now I'm on a backing away stretch, so I don't really post to Instagram that much. But yeah, I definitely think that if that is, and it is important, so I do understand that. But if that's the way that you're planning to build a following or like get customers or stores to notice you, then you definitely have to pay attention to how your feed looks and what hashtags you're using. But a really good strategy for greeting cards or for any sort of gifty thing that would be in a boutique is to like the shops that you want to get in. Comment on some of their photos and just kind of be engaged with them. And I definitely, I think, had a lot of shops reach out to me because I did that. I implemented those strategies, and those were probably the most beneficial to me as far as getting in shops. And the thing is with shops is that once they're following you on Instagram or once they have your products in their store, then you get more followers just because of that. So other people will notice you maybe posting on their feed. And if they like greeting cards, they'll see like Rhubarb Paper Co. Who's that? And click on that and come and follow you. Just like little subtle things that you can do daily. I would go on these spurts where I would just pick like 15 minutes of my day and go through and like follow shops that I felt would be a good fit for Rhubarb, like a few of their photos, comment on at least one of their photos. And usually I would say within a few days, I would have at least one of those stores contacting me for wholesale information or like emailing me with an order. So
Yeah, and
that's
I
what
mean,
I do it.
I think in that instance, like if you were to follow me and be commenting and I saw your handle, it said Paper Co on it. Like I know that
Right,
it's a relevant thing. So maybe that's
right,
something for people to keep in mind too when they're naming their business or when they're making their Instagram handle, for example. Make
right.
it something that, you know, it's not just like Sarah24. It's like
Yeah,
your
exactly.
actual company name and making it obvious that it's a paper company.
Right. And I
Yeah.
think another really good tidbit, I did it just because I don't like my face plastered anywhere. But I did my personal like avatar, my image is of greeting cards on Instagram. So I didn't use a personal photo. I'm not sure if that has been helpful or not. But a lot of times when people have personal photos, I don't know like who they are or what their brand is,
Mm-hmm.
even by their, like if their handle doesn't seem to kind of match, stationery or whatever, then I'm not really going to know unless I go click on it. So I think having your product in some way, shape, or form as your photo,
Mm-hmm.
that probably makes somewhat of a difference as well.
For sure. Yeah. Or even just a logo that you use on everything that's going to
Yeah,
be recognizable throughout everything.
exactly.
So I think the other part of this question that is kind of like an undertone here is like, how did you build a loyal following base? So I know that I mean, I don't know how many people actually looked at your cards before this call, but like a lot of them look very similar, and
Right.
it's just like the funny green, like you have a style of them, and it's kind of recognizable. Now that I've seen one Rhubarb Paper Company card and I bought it, now I see them everywhere, and I'm like, oh, I know that's Rhubarb,
Right.
So how was that like a conscious thing that you did right off the bat, or did you kind of grow that and discover which ones were popular and then carry that on, and did that turn into a loyal customer base? Like how did that whole cycle
Right.
kind of work?
I think when I first started designing cards, they were all hand illustrated. So every single card that I had was hand illustrated. And I guess I just had looked around Etsy and thought, like, that's what people want. So I'm just going to try to make my own illustrated cards. So I knew I was going to do stationery. I just really didn't know what route that was going to, what route I was going to go down to get there. And I kind of realized after, even though they were kind of becoming successful in Nova Scotia, I kind of realized that they just weren't me. Like I wasn't really being myself in designing those. I was kind of doing what I thought people would want. And then I remember my first text-based card that was kind of sarcastic and funny. It just felt more like me, like my personality, my vibe. So I did a few of those and they became extremely popular. And that's really when Rhubarb started to grow, was by really just being like authentic and who I am instead of trying to do what I felt like, would sell. And then yeah, that just grew and grew and grew. Although I don't know about them being so much noticeable, or you can pick them out anymore, because it seems like there are a lot more people doing text-based now. But at the time, there really weren't any lines that were just text-based.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, on one hand, that helped me kind of stick out and grow a following, because they were a little more original at that time. But I think the big reason that I was able to grow a larger following on Instagram, although it's not that big, like it's not even 9,000 people. So I know someone that's like a friend of mine who has like 35,000 followers, and it just seems like crazy to me. But I think the biggest takeaway for me has been sharing parts of your life and your story is what people connect to. And I would say that's the number one way in which I've grown a loyal following. I'm sure there are lots of people that follow me that have never purchased a card from me, but I also know that there are a lot of people that do continuously purchase from me over and over again and are super supportive on Instagram. So share your day-to-day life, share struggles that you have. I suffer from anxiety and depression. I was really open about that. And it did grow me a following. That wasn't the purpose or the reason for that. But I do feel like whenever you're authentic and being your true self and sharing personal details, people can connect to that. And then they feel like a bond, like a friendship with you. And I've met a lot of wonderful people through Instagram because of sharing about like mental health, or sharing about just like frustrations in life or frustrations in business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely think that's the number one way that you can grow a following or connect to people, is to share real parts of your life.
And it's so much easier now on Instagram too with stories, because before it was like you only had the caption to do that. And so sometimes, and I
Right.
mean, sharing photos that were unrelated to your product,
Right.
it was like kind of frowned upon. But now you can do that in the stories and it's so much better. Like I feel like I've
Yeah.
had so many of these interviews where this topic comes up of just being authentic, and I love that you said it as it related to your cards too. Like as soon as you started being authentic and doing what you actually wanted to do is when they actually took off and people connected to them. It's like this intangible, you can't pinpoint exactly why, but people can just feel it. And I can like, I mean, I can tell, like I can see your personality in the cards, even though it's just text. Like it's just, yeah. And
yeah, I think that's a big takeaway piece of advice for anybody, no matter what your product is that there are actually a lot of businesses that I've seen and they've had really wonderful products. And I think like, what is it? Why isn't this company taking off? Or why isn't this product taking off? And generally, I feel some sort of disconnect between like the product and the person behind the product. Or I feel like they're not sharing enough of who they personally are to keep me, like to make me invested. I want to feel invested in like a company and a product. I want to know like, so if I'm supporting you, what is this helping you do in your life? Like for me, I'm very honest in that, you know, Rhubarb has made my life much easier in that this is how I pay for my kids to go to like Taekwondo lessons or for us to go on like mini family vacations or go do that sort of stuff. It would not be possible if it wasn't for Rhubarb. And so I'm super grateful and appreciative to the people that even buy like a single card from me. And I think if you frame it that way, it's like you're not out to make, like, I think so many people are entrepreneurial and they're really in it to make money and to have their businesses be like this huge successful thing. But I want to support the people. It's like it really affecting their day-to-day life. And it's something that they love to do, not just a great idea that they had that they thought would, you know, make them a lot of money. Because there's no authenticity in that. Like you should always be doing stuff that you love and you make that a business.
And I think the whole like support local and support small business thing, it just, it like lends itself well to this kind of business too. Like if I was trying to sell, I don't know, electronics or something, it wouldn't be the same thing, but you're trying to sell a greeting card that like has literally been in your hands and you're selling like it's a small business. And those are the kind of shops that you want to get into. So if you aren't living that, and if you aren't actually like actively promoting that as something you believe in, then you will feel that disconnect. Your cards being in that store would be like, why are her cards in here? They should just be in Hallmark or like, you know, selling at an airport or something. It's not the same. So yeah, for sure. It's an interesting point. It's like a total sidebar of what we're talking about. But I think, like I said, it comes up in so many of these conversations.
Definitely. And I'm the only person. I have no employees. I've had like a couple of people that have done little odd things for me, but I'm the one who is here stuffing envelopes with cards every single day. So I think that's saying, like, not that there's anything wrong with hiring people. Of course, I'd love to get to that point where I could, you know, pay someone to work for me. But right now I'm at a really comfortable level and it is literally me that is like designing the products and putting them in the envelope and putting them in the boxes and trudging over to the post office in the snow.
And the people who are buying your cards want to know that. So that's how you build that loyalty.
Yeah. I think when it comes to social media, you should post a product photo. You should post a few product photos in a row, but then I feel like every third or fourth photo should either be like a personal photo or at least the caption, the copy should be personal of some sort.
Something real. Yeah.
Yes. You need to be sharing more stuff. You're just not like, here's a product, buy my stuff. Right? Like no one feels a connection to that. So
100% agree.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's get back to some like actual greeting card based questions. We have, this is a good one actually. When we talk about shipping is always a big conversation. So any tips on lowering shipping costs for a small business, since general customer prices are based off expectations like Amazon and stuff like that, or Hallmark in this instance?
Right.
So do you build shipping into your price when you are, let's say on Etsy, for example?
I don't build shipping into my price. I build the supplies to ship into my shipping costs, but I never put the cost of shipping into my price at all. I think that is, I don't know. Then when you raise your prices and then, I don't know, it just gets really difficult to do it that way. But yeah, so definitely supply. So like my mailers, my boxes, things like that are all figured into the shipping costs. I mean, I use Canada Post to ship everything. I don't use FedEx or UPS or anything like that. And and they have raised their prices, but so far they still seem the least expensive to me. I really don't have very many tips and tricks when it comes to shipping. I just, if you're in a larger city, you might have better options. I'm in a small town, so Canada Post is pretty much the way that I have to do things right now. One trick, though, is that if you send your cards, I'll show you an order, for example. So there's a card in here, just one single card. If you ship them in flat mailers like this and they fit through the slot, then this can just go as regular postage. You don't have to pay like the small packet fee, which is how they generally want products to be shipped. But if you're shipping paper, then you can get away with sending them in little envelopes like this, and then you're just charged like the stamp or whatever, versus having to pay like small packet or light packet. That's pretty much the only tip as far as shipping is concerned that I have used consistently, because you pay way less for shipping that way for things like greeting cards. But as far as, pins or like other products, there aren't really any tricks or tips unless you can find a really good company to work with.
So, yeah. So how much, okay, I guess it's also great that it's paper because it's a lot lighter than most things.
That's right.
Because shipping just goes up exponentially when it's like a little bit heavier or not in those flat mailers like you were saying.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's the average, just to lay it all out, what's the average cost of your card and how do you structure shipping on Etsy?
So the cost of my card on Etsy, I think it's been so long since I've looked, but I think it's like $4.50 US. Okay. For a card on Etsy, one of my cards. And then shipping is, I think it's like a little over $2. And then with the exchange rate, that covers the cost of the shipping and the mailer. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind is the exchange. I have my shop set in USD because the majority of my Etsy customers are in the States. Mm-hmm. So I've a couple of times had Canadians ask, oh, why are the prices like this? Well, it's because the majority of my customers are in the US. But yeah, it's like a little over $2 US. And then the exchange means that covers the shipping cost. For probably, I would say 3 cards, something like that is the range. And then the cost of my mailer as well. So then you just have to kind of work in tiers from there. Once you're into like 4, 5, 6 cards, it does go up obviously a little bit, but I wouldn't say it's too much.
And you ship internationally, like all around the world, or?
I do, yeah. It can get quite pricey.
So shipping changes based on where people are, or price that you just mentioned would be for North America, probably.
Yeah, it would be for North America. Well, yeah. So there would be Canada, there would be North America, and then there would be international. Those are the three rates that there would be.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So let's keep going here. We have, at what point, and I know you mentioned that you don't like doing craft shows, so this is maybe not something that you know much about or would have an opinion on, but at what point would you recommend smaller startup stationery companies do big shows like NSS, which is National Stationery Show? Is that right?
Yes.
And if you do suggest that people do that, how do you suggest they prepare for scaling up like that?
So this is I think if you're in the stationery industry, you dream of doing NSS. I definitely did when I started. I really wanted to go to New York and pitch my line to all of these buyers, and I thought it would be fantastic. And now I am not so into the whole idea of doing NSS. I think that you're going to find that with the way the industry works now, more buyers are just coming to you from social media or emailing you or what have you. I think that the cost of NSS, I don't know if you'd make that back. It's not a very popular opinion. There are a lot of people that are really diehard about NSS and think it's really important to go. And I see the social aspect of it. You are meeting buyers for stores. You're building a connection with them that way. You're meeting fellow stationery designers. It's great. I'm sure it's really beautiful. I'd love to walk the show one day. That would be really fun. But I do not think that NSS is like make or break for a business. And I've talked to many really big lines that are quite famous and popular that have said that they will not do NSS again. or that they've done NSS for the past 3 years and it's gone downhill every year. So I wouldn't really want to dissuade someone completely from doing it, because if it's their dream and something they really want to do and they think that it would be beneficial, then I say do it. But I don't think that you really have to do NSS anymore. There are lots of other ways. A big thing that people do around NSS time is they kind of send like a stationery show in a box. They send like a mailer, or they send samples, and they make them really pretty and beautiful, and they send them to like their dream stores. And that's a really great way to like participate, but not necessarily have to pay $10,000 to $20,000 to do NSS.
It's so crazy.
That's what it costs. Yeah.
So crazy.
Yeah, it's insane. I know people that have just started their business and only been doing it for 6 months, have not even made a profit, and they're going off and doing NSS. And I just, no, thank you. I don't want to save my money.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, even just your typical craft show, some of those can get expensive. And just doing one kind of shows you how much the benefit is. Not that it's the same as doing NSS, because normally if you book something, it's a much bigger order. But yeah. I mean, I don't know enough.
Well, I would say for markets, just be choosy. And the same thing with shows. There are other ways to do retail shows like that. There's Atlanta Mart, there's one in Las Vegas. There are other less expensive ones. But I would just say do a lot of research and be really choosy about even like markets locally. Just talk to fellow, stationery designers or anyone that sells a product that did it the previous year. Maybe you can look at a list, if you can find it online, of people that did a market the year before, and ask how well they did. Because there are some markets that are beneficial and worth it, and some shows that are beneficial and worth it, and others that are not. So it's important to do your research.
Yeah. And I mean, like you said, that goes for anybody who sells a product. Like it's not always beneficial. Okay. How about printing? We talked about shipping. Now about printing. So someone asked, they'd be curious to know about which printers to use, which inks to use, and stuff like that. So how do you go about printing? Do you print your own, or do you outsource that?
So I outsource printing. I have I did print a little bit at first, and then grew to need to outsource. So I outsource. I do digital and offset. So some of my designs, the ones that are the most popular, those are printed offset. The ones that aren't as popular are printed digital. I just use a local print shop in Dartmouth, which is about 45 minutes from here. And so that's what I would suggest to anyone that's going to outsource printing. Just really get samples from every single place that you have in your area. And whatever's the best quality and the best price, obviously, that's really important as well. So it's, I know lots of stationery designers do letterpress printing, or, different types of printing methods, but it just seems like so much effort. I kind of contemplated doing letterpress for a while, but you have to like figure out how to use a letterpress, and I was thinking that might take up a lot of my time, so I didn't want to go that route.
Yeah, well, and I interviewed a stationery designer recently who does wedding invites and suites, and we were talking about printing, and she brought up a good point that if you're looking locally for printers, or if you're like you said, you're getting samples from all these different places and pricing from them, you also want to sort of build into that process like an interview kind of style, where you're not just getting the sample, you're seeing like how quickly they respond to you, how friendly they are, how helpful they are, as opposed to just which one's the cheapest and has the right paper. Because when it comes down to it, you're going to have to deal with this person a lot. And in a crunch, if you need help, that even if they're a little bit more expensive, that will be worth it in the long run.
Right. It's true. Yeah. I mean, I kind of feel it's like any sort of new job, though. I've been through a few printers. They're usually really great at first. And then when a problem occurs, then things start to get crazy, because oftentimes you want your product because you have to ship it. So that's important as well. Don't be afraid to move on to another printer if one that you have isn't working out, because the most important thing, obviously, is that your cards are of quality. People are paying money for them. So I've had to call my printer a couple of times and be like, I cannot sell these. Like, they ship them to me. I don't even go pick them up. It's just figured into the cost. So I've gotten them and been like, yeah, these aren't going to work. And that can be, yeah, you definitely want to be working with someone who can take that criticism and is going to do what they can to like fix the problem. And not every manager of a print shop or every print shop owner is going to necessarily be that way. So it is really, really important to find someone that you can work with long term. But if it doesn't work out after the first month or two, then just move on and try to find someone else.
Yeah, for sure. And so along those lines of sourcing printers, I know some people use like Uline and stuff to source the packaging. Is that what you use?
I use Uline for my boxes, my shipping boxes, but don't really use them for much else. We're at a disadvantage in Canada, obviously, because we just don't have as many sources for things like envelopes or boxes or anything like that. So unfortunately, I wish I could find a local place. I suggest local if you can, like over anything. But if you can't, then obviously you have to look to the bigger box places like Uline.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I just want to mention to anybody watching, if they have questions, to start submitting them now and we can start reading them, because I think we're just about at the end of the ones that were submitted ahead of time. We had one more, though, that's an interesting one, and I don't know how much you have an opinion on this, Anita, but we can discuss it either way. Sure. What are your thoughts on offering printable greeting cards as digital downloads, so people who do that kind of thing on Etsy?
I don't mind it. I've contemplated doing it, but I think it needs to be, I think you have to really decide. When I was starting my line, I actually was kind of going back and forth between if I was just going to do printables or if I was going to do like tangible products. And for me, it felt important to do tangible products. I feel like there is, I mean, the thing with doing printables is, I guess it depends on if you're going to do that as a portion of your business or if you're going to do that as your sole, like stationary business. Obviously, you wouldn't really have your items in stores if you're doing it that way. That would just be a retail component. And I've contemplated having a separate store on Etsy or a separate website, which is completely all digital downloads. But I haven't taken that leap yet, or I don't know if I'll do that. But there is something for me about actually doing tangible products and having a studio space and stuffing them in the envelopes and having them in stores. That is part of the allure for me in doing this. I have nothing against printables at all. I guess like business people like to say that you should have as many different revenue streams as possible. And I think adding that one to a business is a valid way to make money. I see nothing wrong with that at all. The market might be saturated a little bit on Etsy with printables, but I'm not sure.
And it could be a good way, though, to get your feet wet with the whole thing, because the shipping and all the calculations for your cost and all the extra pieces you have to do with that can be a little bit overwhelming. So if you're a graphic designer or someone who just wants to make the actual graphics and see how it goes first, that could be a good way to start too.
Yeah, for sure. And if you decided that at that point you wanted to do tangible products, you could do that as well. You could either close down the printable shop and parlay those to tangible products, or you could do both. Yeah, there's lots of options.
For sure. Okay, so I haven't seen any other questions come in, but I have one last question for you that I think is important. If you were to restart your business right now, like say you were just starting it now and you had never done this before, what would be the first kind of place you would start? Like, what would be your action plan?
I think there's so many facets to this question, because I think if you're talking on a personal level, I would say definitely have the passion for it and it be something that you love. If you don't have that, I kind of started off a little wobbly there. So I feel if I would have been doing the cards that I wanted to do from the beginning, then things would have went a little bit smoother. So there's that aspect. Something that's really practical is have your business registered, look into what kind of bookkeeping you're going to use. All that sort of stuff is really important, the financial aspect, because what happens if you get busy very quickly is that all goes on the back burner, and then you have a big mess to deal with afterwards. So it's definitely important to have like all the financial stuff figured out. Because this started for me as kind of like a side thing, like thinking, will this work? I was a stay-at-home mom of 2 boys, doing the freelance thing. So, it was kind of like, is this going to be something that's going to actually like make me money? Is it not? You don't really know always when you go into it. So, but going into it with a plan that it is going to be financially successful and having all those sorts of things, at least in place, or knowing a bit about like the financial aspect of running a business, I think is really important because you won't feel as overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
And just doing your research, what kind of envelopes you're going to use, how you plan to ship. So having sample products and going on the Canada Post website or another website and kind of looking at the weight for your products and figuring that all out will be less of a headache, because it is a bit of a nightmare if you just kind of slap some stuff up on Etsy or on a website and then you're dealing with all of that stuff as you go. So as many things as you can have planned in advance, I think that's also really important.
Yeah. So I feel like what I'm hearing you say is to think about the logistics before you actually try and sell anything, which I think is good advice for anybody trying to sell any kind of product.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it doesn't feel like in the moment you just want to do it and kind of see if it's going to be successful. But in the long term, you'll be very happy if you kind of planned everything out in advance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so a couple questions did come in afterwards, and these are kind of just interesting, quick ones. Are your designs hand-drawn and designed and then scanned in digitally, or are they done digitally right off the bat? And I know a lot of them are text, but the ones that aren't, are any of them hand-done anymore?
So the original cards that were hand illustrated, they were drawn on paper and then scanned into Illustrator and then vectorized and then placed onto like cards. Then when I moved to text-based, that's all done in Illustrator. So it's all just like a font and created in Illustrator and then printed. So that's basically the process.
Yep. And the next question was, what user-friendly program do you use to create? So mostly Adobe Illustrator?
Yeah, so I'm an Illustrator user. I mean, I know lots of people that design their cards in Photoshop. So I mean, I can't really speak to any other programs, but Photoshop's pretty easy to use. So it takes it'll take a little while, obviously, to get used to it, but it's pretty user-friendly and you could quickly learn how to make cards in Photoshop. Illustrator is what I choose to use, and I would suggest that if you do hand illustrations, then you would use, but most people use iPads and stuff like that now to do their illustrations. But if you are still working on paper, then yeah, you would definitely scan it in, use Illustrator, vectorize it. So you can then, when you vectorize it, you can make your images like smaller or larger and like fit them how you want on the dimensions of your card. So that would be the suggestion I'd have for that.
Okay. And then one last question that came in at the start that I think I somehow didn't see come up here. Someone said that they are from the generation where you always sent thank you cards, etc., or small blank cards and thank you cards. Right. Do you think there would be a market for just a business around that type of card, or do you need to be more diverse?
You definitely need to be more diverse, for sure. There are times of the year when stores are purchasing cards. So if you only have one type of card, they're going to go to another store, another brand that offers more variety. Because as a shop owner, I'm not one, but I mean, as a shop owner, in their head, they're thinking like, the less places I have to order from and deal with all of that, the better. So if they're looking at ordering, 100 cards for their store to fill up space, generally they probably wouldn't first think and go to just a shop that offers just thank you cards or that sort of thing. So I think you definitely need to have more diverse offerings. The number one type of card you have to have is birthday card. So the more birthday cards you have in your line, the better it is. I'm like weird. I don't really always go by what you're supposed to do. Like most card designers release new designs in the spring and then again in the fall, or some do it like before Valentine's Day. It's just, there's so many different dates and I just can't bother to pay attention to any of that stuff. I just kind of do what I do. I try to be like, okay, this really should have a birthday card. But if one doesn't come to me, like naturally, then I'm not gonna just force a birthday card so that people will buy it. So it is important to kind of keep that in mind, that they're looking for diversity, and that there are certain things that, like certain times of the year where people are going to be buying cards and giftware and stuff like that. So you kind of have to cater to that a little bit, but also do your own thing. I think though, if you do want to have a successful line, you'd probably need to offer more than just thank you cards, and maybe birthday and thank you. I don't know. Maybe you could do both.
Cool. Well, I think that finishes up all the questions that have come up. Thank you so much, Anita, for coming on here.
Of course.
This is awesome. I think it'll be really helpful for anybody who's thinking about doing that, because I know that it's kind of one of those things where as soon as you learn hand lettering or any kind of art that you want to sell, greeting cards are like a natural progression of that for a lot of people. But it can be,
for sure,
it can be a lot to think about when you're like logistically, like you're saying, but it's important to do all of that.
Yeah, I think like one other thing I should mention that I didn't really mention was that do your research too on cards that are already on the market. So go on Etsy or just type into Google like the phrase that you're thinking of, or even like if you had were doing a card that had like a sloth on it and then you had a funny phrase, just type it in and look for it first, because it's really important that like you don't have something that's too similar to someone else. Not that it's even necessarily copying, but if you have something that's even like remotely similar to another brand, then you're just not going to be able to stand out as much. So that's a big piece of advice. Just make sure your stuff is original.
Yeah, and I mean, it could be copyright.
Exactly.
And for anybody
you have to be really careful.
For anybody who's wondering about that too, there's also a Q&A with, we did a Q&A with a creative attorney for creatives, Christina Scalera, and she went over all of that and how you can and can't copy other things. So lots of helpful things on the other the past Q&As. But yeah, thanks again, Anita, for coming on here so much.
Sure,
and for anybody who's listening, I will come back in the comments here and just type in some answers to some of the questions that are coming up. But for now, I think we'll leave it at that.
Great.
Okay, thanks so much. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.